opening lines, Wordsworth basically sets the scene. He describes a place he's revisiting for the first time in 5 years, and he reminds us of that with the repetition of again. So, from the beginning, at the same time as painting a picture of the scene with his words, Wordsworth involves himself in that scene, hearing the sound of the mountain springs, beholding the cliffs, reposing under a sycamore tree, viewing the cottages and the plots of land around them, and seeing the hedgerows, the farms, and the smoke rising here and there in the houseless woods. There's a strong sense of the visual here, of what the poet beholds and views and sees. But he also engages the sense of hearing, using it to create an atmosphere of peacefulness. The sound of the mountain springs is a soft murmur. The sky is quiet. The smoke rises in silence. But that sense of quiet peacefulness, reinforced by the fact that the poet reposes, rests under a tree, is counterbalanced by the lively activity of the rural scene. The waters of the spring are rolling. The scene is wild. The cliffs connect the land and the sky. The fruits are clad in green and lose themselves among the trees. The hedgerows run wild. The smoke is sent up. There's a lot going on. But all this activity takes place in seclusion. Wordsworth, like the hermit he imagines sitting in his cave, is alone. Putting all that together, this opening section of the poem expresses the poet's deep feeling of relief at being, after a gap of several years, once again away from human society, immersed in the world of nature, in which he finds a wealth of lively activity. But of course, there are other people in this picture. We can't see them, or at least Wordsworth doesn't mention them, but they must be there. And explicitly indicative of human activity, there's the uncertain signal of the smoke. Wordsworth can only speculate about the origin of the smoke, perhaps a hermit alone in the woods by choice, or perhaps homeless vagrants. Modern criticism, with its emphasis on the historical and political context of literature, makes much of those vagrants. It's easy to suppose that in his imagined hermit, Wordsworth sees a kindred spirit, one who, like himself, seeks out the peacefulness of nature as a place in which to develop the spirit. But the vagrants open up more complex and in some ways more interesting lines of thought. In reality, the smoke would almost certainly have come from charcoal burning, but the area was also well known for vagrants. William Gilpin, in his Observations on the River Wye, published in 1782, but describing a visit made in 1770, talks about the poverty and wretchedness of vagrants living in the ruins of the abbey itself, and numerous critics, Damien Walford Davies, Marjorie Levinson, Kenneth Johnston, Quentin Bailey, Robert Brinkley, David Chandler and others have written about the political and ideological implications of Wordsworth's allusion to homeless vagrants in the woods near the Abbey, speculating on possible allusions to Milton and the Civil War, or to Shakespeare and King Lear, and to Britain's wars with France. But generally coming back to the idea that the vagrants, like the hermit, form a part of Wordsworth's image of himself, that he saw himself as part hermit, part vagrant in relation to the society in which he lived. Wordsworth often talks about how nature sustains him, not merely when he's out in the countryside experiencing it, but also when he's back in the world of cities and crowds of people. The opening lines of this second section of the poem are echoed in I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, where he lies on his couch in vacant or in pensive mood, and his heart fills with pleasure at the memory of those blooming daffodils. I much prefer the way he says it here. I get a lot more satisfaction out of his tranquil restoration as he remembers the beauteous forms of nature in lonely rooms and mid the din of towns and cities than I do from the idea of his heart dancing with the daffodils. Maybe that's just me, but I don't think anyone could deny that he explores his feelings, his relationship with nature, far more profoundly here than in the poem on the daffodils. With that comment on the little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love, he makes an explicit connection between the world of nature and human nature. For him, responsiveness to the beauty of nature is a part of what makes a good person good. And he goes further even than that. It's almost like a meditation, drawing us more and more deeply into itself as the poem leads us from uplifting memories and the impulse towards kindness into a serene and blessed mood that puts the body to sleep and animates the soul, and we see into the life of things. The assuredness, the composure, the control here puts the lines leading up to it in a very different perspective. The poet intends us to feel distanced from his younger self, just as he himself does. Those lines weren't meant to engage us. They were there to contrast with what follows, with the poet's present understanding of nature. Even so, if I'd been Wordsworth's publisher, I'd probably have been advising him to cut everything between "we see into the life of things" and "for I have learned to look on nature." As for this section itself, much as I like it, it lays itself slightly open to ridicule with that word "something." We've got all that build-up, a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something, which feels like a bit of a letdown, a failure to exploit the power of words and language. Surely he could have found a better word. That isn't quite fair, because, of course, it isn't just something. It's something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and so on. This use of cataphoric reference, of defining something through what follows, rather than by what precedes it, is part of the resonance, part of the measured tone of these lines.